Penny Chang, born in Pittsburgh in 1984, was the youngest of 4 children in a Chinese immigrant household. Her father, a mathematics professor at Cleveland State University, and her mother raised their children in Shaker Heights, Ohio, a suburb chosen for its cultural diversity and educational opportunities. The family had strict rules against dating until college, but nevertheless, Penny embraced American teenage culture with enthusiasm. Described by her older sister Joanne as gregarious, talkative, and neat, Penny thrived in social settings, often bonding with Joanne over shopping trips to Beechwood Place and thrift stores. Penny's childhood included a brief period living with relatives in China before returning to the US at age 5. This dual cultural exposure had a major impact on shaping her identity. Academically curious, she spent hours at the Shaker Heights Public Library experimenting with computers, a hobby she shared with her brother Sean. Her creativity extended to anime-style artwork and chess, which she played competitively. Friends and family remembered her as a, quote, Renaissance girl who wrote love poems, obsessed over Titanic, and balanced her traditional upbringing with a fiercely independent streak. Another key individual in this case is a man named Scott Struthers. He born in Georgia in 1978 and grew up in a fractured household. His parents divorced when he was an infant, and his mother, a registered nurse, relocated to Cleveland with her parents. After remarrying and having 2 daughters, she divorced again, leaving Scott to navigate a turbulent home life in a Van Aken Boulevard apartment. Described as socially awkward and academically inconsistent, Struthers struggled to stand out at Shaker Heights High School, where many peers were bound for Ivy League schools. Despite scoring high on the SAT and earning a scholarship to Ohio State University, his freshman year unraveled due to asthma flare-ups and depression, resulting in failing grades. After dropping out, Struthers returned to Ohio State in 1997, rooming with Penny's brother Sean. The two had been close friends in high school, but tensions arose during their shared dorm life. Struthers resented Sean's criticism of his habits, later blaming Penny for the rift. Eventually, he was able to rebound academically, however, this was just a mask for the growing emotional instability within him. By summer 1998, he had withdrawn again, citing depression, and returned to Cleveland with no clear direction. It was during that same year Struthers and Penny spent more time together. During the summer, when Penny was 14 and Struthers 21, the two worked together at a light bulb factory in Beechwood, Ohio. Again, Struthers had known the Chang family for years through Penny's brother Sean, often visiting their home during his high school days. Their shared job provided daily interaction, which Struthers misinterpreted as romantic interest. Penny viewed him as a family friend and occasional companion for movies or casual outings. Struthers, however, became fixated, later writing in his journal that their time together felt like a, quote, once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and a storybook romance. This infatuation intensified when Penny began high school that fall. As she distanced herself to focus on academics and new friendships, he grew increasingly agitated. He resented her growing independence, interpreting her natural social growth as a personal betrayal. In journal entries, he hopped between idealizing Penny as a wonderful thing and vilifying her as a selfish, arrogant, stupid bitch who casually ruined his life. His entries reveal a distorted perception of their interactions. He blamed her for his academic failures, financial troubles, and social isolation, even though these predated their summer job. By September 1998, Struthers' obsession escalated into harassment. He inundated Penny's family with over 100 phone calls per night, often hanging up when Penny's father answered. When confronted by police, Struthers admitted to the calls but claimed they were just a talk. The Changs disconnected their landline, but Struthers shifted to physical intimidation. He poured fiberglass resin into the gas tank of the family car, rendering it unusable, and used a slingshot to shatter the windows of Penny's bedroom. In October, Struthers attempted to burn down the Chang's garage using a makeshift blowtorch. Police intercepted him with flammable materials in his pockets, leading to his arrest on misdemeanor charges of telephone harassment, criminal damaging, and arson. During questioning, he confessed to all acts, including the vandalism, but showed no remorse. Shaker Heights prosecutor Lisa Gale noted that Struther's behavior met the general definition of stalking, but Ohio law at the time required the victim to express fear, which Penny had not done. This legal gap prevented more severe charges. Facing court proceedings, Struthers voluntarily admitted himself to the Cleveland Clinic in late October 1998, a move his attorney later described as strategic to look good in court. During his 30-day stay, psychiatrists diagnosed him with delusional disorder, impulse control disorder, and personality disorder not otherwise specified, noting his homicidal ideas and plan and intent toward Penny. As part of therapy, Struthers kept a journal where he detailed violent fantasies, including one entry that said the following: "How cool and superior will you look when I blow your brains out into the ground?" Despite these threats, clinic staff discharged Struthers in late November, deeming him no longer a danger. Before his release, they breached patient confidentiality to warn the Changs and police about his prior homicidal ideation, but assured them he posed no immediate risk. Penny's father later recalled relying on this assurance, abandoning plans to relocate the family. After his release, Struthers began outpatient therapy with Dr. Raina Krell, a private psychiatrist, as part of his probation. He presented as remorseful and compliant, telling Krell he wanted to move on. However, he privately escalated his campaign against the Changs. Using aliases like Travis Black and David Smith, he sent over 60 pages of threatening emails to Penny and her family, oscillating between racist comments and third-person narratives about his rage. One email from March 9th, 1999 said, "There are emotions that you aren't encouraged to express, but here is one that you are allowed to have. Anger. Scott would like to rip off her lips and put them in a blender." Struthers also purchased a 9mm pistol, practicing at a local shooting range while continuing to surveil Penny's routines. Fast forward to March 16th, 1999, it was an unseasonably warm day in Shaker Heights, Ohio. Penny, who had just turned 15, convinced her parents to let her walk to school with friends. Unbeknownst to her, Struthers had spent the previous night drinking with his stepfather, Ted Hullett, in what was intended as a last-ditch effort to help him move on. Instead, Struthers had already made up his mind. That morning, Struthers armed himself with the pistol and a set of earplugs, then made his way to the intersection of Lee and Van Aken, a busy spot in the heart of Shaker Heights. Notably, this location was across the street from the police station and mere yards from the courtroom where he had previously been ordered to stay away from Penny. He waited inside the RTA rapid transit canopy, watching for Penny to pass by on her way to school. At approximately 7:40 a.m., as Penny walked with friends towards school, Struthers emerged from his hiding place. Without warning, he approached her from behind and shot her twice in the back. The force of the bullets knocked her face first into the street. Struthers then strode up to her fallen body, stood over her, and fired 2 more shots into her in full view of the morning commuters and within sight of the police station. Witnesses later described the brutality and suddenness of the attack, with one remarking, "I didn't know so much blood could come from such a little body." Penny's friends, stunned and traumatized, ran for help. 2 police officers, Mike Rowe and Ralph Spidalieri, were nearby at a coffee shop when they heard the shots and rushed to the scene. As the officers arrived, they saw Struthers calmly walking toward them with his hands raised. He immediately complied with their instructions, telling them, "The gun is in my pocket, the gun is in my pocket." Witnesses described him as completely devoid of emotion, his demeanor eerily calm given the violence he had just committed. Penny was rushed by ambulance to St. Luke's Hospital, but despite emergency efforts, she was pronounced dead at 9:50 a.m. The news devastated Penny's family, and her father was immediately brought to the hospital to see her. "They bring me to see Penny," he later recalled. "I saw Penny asleep on the bed, and on the floor was all the blood. I check her pulse. I found nothing." Penny's sister Joanne remembered the moment she learned her sister was gone. "My mom said, 'Scott shot Penny,' and I was like, 'Is she okay?' My mom was like, 'No, she's not okay.' Oh my gosh, those words, 'she's not okay,' well, how bad off is she?" She said, "She's dead." Scott Struthers was charged with aggravated murder. Initially, he pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. However, as his trial approached and with mounting evidence of premeditation and sanity at the time of the crime, he changed his plea to guilty. He was sentenced to life in prison with eligibility for parole after 23 years. Court psychiatrists determined that despite his history of mental illness and prior psychiatric treatment, Struthers was sane and capable of distinguishing right from wrong at the time of the murder. The insanity defense was deemed untenable, as it would have only brought further scrutiny to his calculated actions and extensive history of threats and planning. This tragic case highlighted serious systemic failures. Communication gaps between the legal system, police, and medical professionals meant that no one had a complete picture of Struthers' threats and behavior. While the clinic notified the family and police of his prior threats, they did not inform the judge overseeing his criminal case. The judge later stated that she would have acted differently had she known the full extent of his risk factors. Both the clinic and Struthers' private therapist underestimated his ongoing risk, despite clear evidence of his obsession and homicidal ideation. Struthers was able to deceive professionals by saying all the right things. Penny's family, particularly her father and sister, have been outspoken about their belief that the system failed Penny. They argue that the clinic's decision to discharge Struthers, despite his documented threats, directly contributed to her death. The family's wrongful death lawsuit sought to hold the clinic and therapists accountable, though the inherent difficulty of predicting violence made legal victory elusive. Rica Roundtree, an 8-year-old girl from Normal, Illinois, died in January 2019 as a result of chronic and severe abuse. Her tragic death exposed critical failures within the Illinois child welfare system, brought legal consequences for those responsible, and sparked public outrage and calls for reform. Rica's suffering began in 2016 when, following her mother Antionetta Simmons' incarceration for drug-related offenses, she was placed in the custody of her father, Richard Roundtree. Richard lived with his girlfriend, Cynthia Baker, also known as Cynthia Clay, a woman with a documented history of child abuse. Baker had previously been indicated by the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services for injuring a stepchild in 2002 and her own daughter in 2012. Despite these red flags, DCFS allowed Rica to remain in the home, a decision that would prove to be a fatal mistake. By 2018, the signs of abuse became increasingly visible. Teachers at Fox Creek Elementary School began to notice that Rica often arrived at school with injuries that were difficult to ignore. A split lip, a black eye, a broken tooth, and scars on her neck. When DCFS investigators questioned Rica about these injuries, she attributed them to accidents, such as falling on toys or hitting her face on a medicine cabinet. These explanations, likely given under duress or coaching, were accepted at face value, and the cases were closed as unfounded. In October 2018, Richard and Baker withdrew Rica from Fox Creek and enrolled her at Prairieland Elementary School. There, staff once again observed bruises on Rica in various stages of healing, but their concerns were similarly dismissed. The nature of the abuse Rica endured was both physically and psychologically torturous. Videos later recovered from Baker's cell phone provided chilling evidence of the cruelty that had become routine in the Roundtree household. Rica was often forced to stand naked in a bedroom holding canned goods in her outstretched arms for extended periods. If her arms faltered, Baker would slap her face or grab her by the neck and threaten to put a collar on the young girl. Other videos showed Baker kneeing Rica in the back repeatedly, causing her to scream in pain and dragging her by the neck into a bedroom before striking her. The humiliation was constant. Rica was recorded shivering and wet, forced to perform handstands while her father filmed the ordeal. In another instance, Baker was seen banging Rica's head against a wall and mocking her injuries. The violence was not hidden from the other children in the household. Baker's biological children and Richard's other children witnessed the abuse and, over time, became desensitized to it. Baker's 7-year-old daughter would later testify that her mother laughed after Rica hit her head on a TV stand. Text messages between Baker and Richard revealed a toxic dynamic in which they expressed mutual frustration with Rica and discussed disciplinary tactics, including making her, quote, hold cans again. The abuse was compounded by medical neglect. In January 2019, Rica began vomiting and complaining of severe abdominal pain. For 2 days, Richard and Baker ignored her worsening condition and did not seek medical attention. On January 25th, Rica collapsed and was rushed to Advocate Bromen Medical Center, where doctors discovered a massive bruise on her abdomen. She was transferred to a hospital in Peoria for emergency surgery, but tragically, she died on the operating table. The autopsy, conducted by Dr. Scott Denton, revealed that the immediate cause of death was peritonitis, a fatal infection resulting from a ruptured intestine caused by blunt force trauma. Dr. Denton documented 67 scars, bruises, and abrasions across Rica's body, as well as traction alopecia, hair loss from violent pulling, and internal bruising beneath her eyes. He concluded that the injuries were consistent with repetitive abuse over weeks or months and ruled out accidental causes. The final weeks of Rica's life were marked by desperation and missed opportunities for intervention. Anjanetta Simmons, recently sentenced to prison for probation violations, pleaded with DCFS to investigate Rica's living conditions, but her appeals went unanswered. On January 7, 2019, a judge denied Simmons' request for custody, citing her lack of progress in rehabilitation programs. 3 weeks later, Rica was dead. The full extent of the abuse only came to light after Rica's death when police, investigating the circumstances, subpoenaed Baker's iCloud account and discovered the videos documenting the abuse. DCFS had never pursued digital evidence during their prior investigations. Prosecutors would later note that if not for Baker's compulsion to record her own crimes, the truth of Rica's suffering might never have been fully uncovered. The legal aftermath of Rica Roundtree's death unfolded over several years, involving multiple criminal trials, sentencing hearings, and subsequent civil litigation. The proceedings not only targeted the individuals directly responsible for Rica's abuse and death, but also scrutinized the role of state agencies and their employees who failed to protect her. Cynthia Baker, the girlfriend of Rica's father, was the central figure in the criminal prosecution. She was arrested and charged with first-degree murder in March 2019, just months after Rica's death. The prosecution's case against Baker was built on a foundation of forensic evidence, eyewitness testimony, and most damningly, those videos Baker herself had recorded. These videos depicted the abuse she inflicted on Rica, which she called discipline. Prosecutors described these recordings as, quote, her own pornography, emphasizing the sadistic and premeditated nature of the abuse. During the trial, which began in November 2019, the jury was shown these videos, which left several jurors visibly emotional. The footage provided a rare and chilling window into the daily reality of Rica's torment. Prosecutor Erica Reynolds called Baker a monster, highlighting her willingness to allow other children in the household to taunt and humiliate Rica. Baker's defense attempted to shift blame onto Richard, Rica's father, suggesting that he was responsible for the fatal blows. Baker took the stand during a post-trial hearing, claiming her previous attorney had failed to call witnesses who could corroborate her account. However, Judge Casey Costigan denied her motion for a new trial, finding the evidence against her overwhelming and the jury's verdict sound. On November 19, 2020, Judge Costigan sentenced Cynthia Baker to life in prison, calling her actions pure evil and demented. He noted the case involved some of the most distressing evidence he had ever encountered. In her statement to the court, Rica's mother, Ann Simmons, confronted Baker directly, imploring her to accept responsibility for her actions. Baker, for her part, apologized but continued to deny killing Rica, maintaining she loved the child. The court, however, found her culpability clear and her sentence appropriate. As for Richard, he was also held criminally responsible, though his charges reflected his role as an enabler and bystander, rather than the direct perpetrator of fatal violence. Richard pleaded guilty in February 2020 to felony child endangerment, admitting that he failed to protect his daughter from Baker's abuse and did not seek medical help as Rica's condition deteriorated. The court sentenced him to 8 years in prison, a punishment that prosecutors described as appropriate given the circumstances, though they acknowledged that no sentence could truly compensate for the loss of Rica's life. Evidence presented at Baker's trial showed that Richard was not merely negligent, but at times complicit. He was seen in videos participating in the punishment of Rica, including ordering her to perform painful exercises while communicating with Baker by phone. Additionally, the legal proceedings extended beyond the immediate household. Victoria Baker, Cynthia Baker's sister, was charged and ultimately convicted of felony witness harassment in 2021 for her role in attempting to influence Richard's testimony during Cynthia Baker's murder trial. Acting as a courier, Victoria delivered a letter from Cynthia to Richard ahead of his anticipated testimony. In the letter, Cynthia pleaded with him to come up with something to exonerate her, even suggesting he take responsibility for the fatal abuse, despite medical evidence indicating otherwise.